course, what I could do, which would probably be the death knell at the end of a long day, is shower you with a blizzard of statistics around worklessness, a whole raft of different initiatives that have come and gone and so forth, and of course, notwithstanding the very real earthquake which is hitting us now and will continue to hit us with welfare reform. So within the context of the role of local government in tackling unemployment in 20 minutes, all I can really do is cover some sort of overarching issues. But first, I want to start with just recognising the track record which local government has had in the past in tackling unemployment. It's been one of an active delivery role over the, here I'm talking decades, okay? Active delivery role, but that shift to more of a strategic role, but never exclusively in many local authorities. And in part this culminated in 2008 and 9 with the independent review by Councillor Stephen Houghton, who's leader of Barnsley Council, who was asked by CLG to look at the role of local government, especially within the context of the onsetting recession. And what he was flagging up then, and I know this to my pain because I was the advisor to the inquiry, and of course advisor means general dog's body, and oh, by the way, Dave, can you write it as well? But what he was flagging up then is, first of all, the critical role that local government brings in terms of the strategic overview, and he was pointing the way to work and skills plans, but critically talking about integrated budgets for employment and skills. Secondly, he set out ideas for a challenge fund to expand work experience for young people, and of course that turned into the Future Jobs Fund. And thirdly, he was pointing out the critical role that local government plays as an employer, significant employer in many areas, and of course a significant procurer of services. And of course, just picking up on the Future Jobs Fund, and again, just sort of recognising the very valuable and important contribution that local government made to the Future Jobs Fund. Whilst it was castigated at the time by the Conservatives and the Coalition as being ineffective and costly, actually DWP's evaluation that came out a few months ago showed that, first of all, it's probably been one of the most effective labour market interventions we've had in recent times. If you were on the Future Jobs Fund, you were 10% more likely to be in work than if you hadn't gone on it, which actually, in labour market programmes terms, 10% is a lot, and secondly, of course, that once you actually factor in all of the gains to society, it wasn't costly at all. But hey-ho, that was scrapped, and onwards we move. But of course, we're talking about the total picture here, so we mustn't forget on the welfare side about your role in housing benefit administration, welfare rights, responsible for neat young people, and of course, some of your role possibly in terms of managing housing stock. So moving to the current situation, of course, a lot of that has gone. It's got no formal role in the delivery or indeed strategy. It's being devolved down to into sort of a contracted market for employment services, primarily through the work programme. And of course, when it comes to welfare, your function around HB administration is being phased out. You do have a new role and responsibility of council tax benefit and social fund. And I would suggest that your role, if any of you have it here, as a social landlord is going to become more and more important within the future context. But let's place that now within the context of localism and how that is bearing on tackling unemployment. First of all, as I've said, the view of the government is that they have devolved employment services because the work programme contractor that covers your area has complete freedom to do what they think is best to get people into employment, the so-called black box. And what that means is that they are supposed to be localising to the needs of the local labour market and personalising for the needs of the individuals that come through the door. But also, as we know, when we're talking about localism, there is also the push around city deals, and some of you, maybe not, might have remembered city strategies, which the previous administration initiated. It was never really going anywhere. It was how can I put it, a sort of gentle testbed for how things might get devolved some way in the future. But certainly my view and our view is that city deals have got a lot more political clout behind them, that there is already real signs of freedoms and flexibilities around employment and skills being pushed down to the initial city deals. And now what's being explored by the Cabinet Office is what they call a core package for any city deal around employment and skills. And we're expecting an announcement possibly around the budget of what that may look like. But all of that is always going to be predicated, and this administration uses exactly the same terms as Labour did. It's all around earned devolution. Local government demonstrating that they can indeed do what they say and deliver better results which are more attuned to the needs of local people and the local economy. And that, to earn that, I think sort of my view, very briefly, of the sort of required capabilities are 6 in number. First of all, knowing the local labour market challenges, using local labour market intelligence, not just looking at the headline figures every now and again, but actively using it to be able to articulate the local labour market failures and challenges. Because too often you can look at your monthly stats, how many have we got on JSA this month, but actually it's that step beyond of actually looking at the successes and shortcomings of the composition of your local labour market. But then you've got to go beyond that. You've got to use that understanding to then assess the effectiveness of national interventions in order to justify why you could improve those national interventions by having more powers yourselves or running your own programs as well. Further to that, you will also need to be demonstrating that you're understanding the impact of welfare reform on local people, and that of course has got to include the impact of your decisions around specifically council tax benefits as to how that will, how your decisions locally will actually affect the gains to work which which university, I was going to say University Challenge, Universal Credit is supposed to be bringing. So second point is knowing the demand side. Okay, you might know the supply side, you might know the composition of your local workforce inside out, what's good about it, what's bad about it. But you've also got to be knowing the demand side. What current employers need, but also what will be attracting the inward investment in terms of the skills profile that employers might be looking for. So again, that's about using labour market intelligence. It's understanding your skills profile locally, and it's understanding the capability that you have to build your skills profile. But again, it's going beyond that, as doubtless Peter Box was talking about this morning. Did he talk about skills mismatches and so forth? Yeah. Hairdressing example? Yeah. I'll tell you what, we did, is Emily going to throw anything at me if I say that? We did the background research for LGA. We've got into terrible trouble with the hairdressing industry, to say the least. But we stand by our figures. We stand by our figures because it is, yes, of course, going on a hairdressing course will generally help employability and so forth. We got, that's not really the point that we're making. The point that we're making is that there's very real current employer demand and vacancies in some sectors and less in others. Yeah, and we've got to be taking that into account, and there has to be mechanisms to bring them together. Thirdly, partnerships that add value. I'll say it again, everybody says it, but in tackling unemployment, and it is unemployment, technically, I'm not going to quibble here as an economist, it should be worklessness that we're talking about. In other words, not just those people who are saying they're ready for work and want work, but also those people who are inactive, on sickness and disabled benefits, employment support allowance, and so forth. Basically, no one single agency, nationally or locally, can fix the problem on their own. It is impossible. Yeah. So how the different agencies are brought together, I think I've given up at the national level. I've got more hope at the local level, and actually is where it should be at the local level. But critically, again, if you're looking at the strategic role of local government, that is your function, as to how you bring sometimes warring and squabbling partners together, sometimes partners that are very willing to come together, but are driven by very different funding regimes. It's very difficult. What we've got to be careful of is that they don't turn into talking shops, that don't generate that sort of analysis and so forth that I was talking about. Really exploiting the freedoms and flexibilities that have now been handed down to colleges, handed down to work programme contractors, to a certain extent handed down to yourselves. And how those partnerships add value is by enabling those local deals to be done between the colleges, between yourselves, and between the different contractors. But I would still say, going back to labour market intelligence, evidence-based and so forth, the more you work on a common and shared use of LMI and a common and shared analysis of that LMI, the more likely it is that as partners you are going to be pulling together. And therefore, the real added value that you could be bringing and should be bringing is that shared analysis. And of course, within the context of partnerships, the Job Centre Plus district manager should now be your best friend, because he does, or she does have money in their pockets, They have the flexible support fund and a great deal more flexibility and only more coming. Housing, I would also say, is critically important. The role of social housing, housing associations, critically important within the context of welfare reform. You know, probably better than me, the impact that welfare reform is having on local people, but the sharp end are those social housing tenants who are being directly impacted now, bedroom tax and so forth, and the role which social housing landlords can actually play in mitigating the worst effects, providing the right sort of advice and so forth. Rattling on. Fourth, leadership, high-level buy-in from politicians and business leaders together, and that's why local enterprise partnerships are so important, but not sufficient on their own. That leadership needs to be providing those clear messages to the supply side infrastructure, by which I mean the FE colleges and the work programme contractors and so forth. This is what we are expecting from you, this is what we want you to do, this is our analysis, we expect you to take away and use it. Fifthly, capability. I banged on about labour market intelligence, but as I've stressed, that isn't just about looking at your JSA numbers, it's using it in an intelligent and analytical way. If funds are going to be devolved downward and any responsibility even over the oversight of funds, then demonstrating the management of funds and critically commissioning is all important. But it's not just, we all know that you can commission because you commission all sorts of services. But the critical step, and this is even difficult for DWP and now MOJ as well, is national government getting their heads around, national civil servants that is, getting their heads around about how you manage markets, how you manage a multitude of different providers and contractors all working to different things, how you manage it and steer it in the direction that you want to go in. So those are the main headlines looking at the time. I shall move on quickly and just talk about universal credit and rollout. Now, I'm assuming that you're basically up to speed with what the intent of universal credit is and the timetable for the rollout. Let me just flag up some of the key issues, which come from not just myself, but also the DWP as well. First of all, digital inclusion. Universal credit and in fact, claiming of benefits in the future, the basic assumption is digital by default. Okay, so now JSA claimants are expected to sign on to the job match, the sort of new Job Centre Plus website, where they're required to register and to search for vacancies on a frequent basis. But we know there will always be a segment of the population who do not have access to the right to either the equipment and or the actual skills to manoeuvre their way around different websites. So the nature of the support that is needed, and also understanding the need by some groups estimated to be around about 20% of claimants that will still need face-to-face support, help and advice to navigate the online experience. So, digital inclusion. Secondly, advice in general. Look, I needn't tell you again, but pretty much for every single claimant, be they out of work or claiming tax credits, in work as well, remember just out of work payments is 5 million, For every single one of those, the world's going to be turned upside down. Yeah? There's going to be a lot of insecurity, a lot of worry, a lot of concern. And of course, there's the transitionary protection for people. Now, I'm just talking about universal credit there, let alone the other measures that are being put through now as well. So the availability of advice to claimants, working with citizens' advice and so forth is critically important. And leading on from that, again, DWP's got a recognition that more needs to be done around providing debt advice and boosting budgeting capability of payments. And of course, the main concern there is with the switch to direct payments for housing. The concern is that people will be getting into arrears, therefore actually ending up in debt and so forth. So what can be done at the local level to provide access to debt advice and to help people with their monthly budgeting, and it will be monthly, remember. And to that end, I still haven't seen the announcement, but there is supposed to be coming out some proposals from DWP around local support partnerships, about how different organisations and the role of local government as well can bring together partners at the local level to provide the digital inclusion strategies, the advice, the debts and so forth. So we are expecting that announcement, and I'm still expecting some money also to be attached to that. And finally, I'll flag up about the next sort of big policy issue that which is around what's called in-work conditionality. Now, we've had out-of-work conditionality, and we all know the regime which people on JSA have to go through. But now, with universal credit, the government is introducing in-work conditionality. The call came out last week, a call for ideas about how that might be applied. Now, whilst that sounds, may or may not sound horrible, the actual basic idea behind it is right. How do we help local people on low incomes to progress, either in terms of working more hours per week, or indeed in terms of moving up the career ladder? What is it that could be provided locally, nationally, maybe what DWP is thinking of, what should be required as well, to help people progress so that they move out beyond the need to claim universal credit. So, I haven't talked about the work programme, which is probably a big relief for you, but you all know that it's underperforming. I'll just point out that the variation, the geographical variation between different areas of the country ranges from 4.8% down to 2.3% in terms of job outcomes from those statistics that came out before Christmas. So the lowest performing areas is less than half of the highest performing areas. So there's some big geographical differences which, from our analysis, cannot be explained by differences between local economies. Cannot be explained. That means that it comes down to, in part, the performance of your contractors. Now, if I was in local government, I would actually be taking a long, hard look at what my local work programme contractors were doing and how they were performing. So I would both be scrutinising, but at the same time, I would be saying, and how can we help? Because let's not forget about it, that actually, over the life of the work programme, on average, 5% of your workforce, the bottom 5% of your workforce, the most disadvantaged 5% of your workforce will be going through the work programme. That's on average. In some of your areas, it's going to be a lot more. So it is important to look at how you scrutinise, but also how you improve performance. So that's a whistle-stop tour of all of the issues. Just to remind you that yes, irrespective of all of that, you are still large employers, how you're offering work experience and so forth, and taking a lead in demonstrating about how as an employer you're offering opportunities, especially to young people, is important. But overall, we've got a very challenging period coming up, and I wish you all the best of luck.